final installment for the Artist's Way that I've been doing. So I think I stopped at week 9. So I've been doing 10, 11, and 12. Weeks 10, 11, 12. And so I've been working on it for the past few weeks. So sometimes it takes me a little more than a week to go through. So week 10 was recovering a sense of self-protection, because it's really important as artists and creative people that we protect our energies. And even as sensitive people, people who, you know, read cards or do healing work, we need to kind of protect ourselves. And so it's talking about some of the dangers of working in a creative or healing field is that we may be tempted to do what's called a U-turn, where we turn around and we are almost at success, but we get shy and we get scared off and we don't want to do that anymore. And that anxiety sometimes gets in the way, and that we sometimes have to feel the fear and do it anyway, because the only way you're going to grow is by doing things that you haven't done before. And then it talks about workaholism, which is like a big thing in our society. I mean, how many times do you ask people how they're doing or what's going on? They say, oh, they're so busy. And it's like busy's like a badge of honor. Like, I'm busy, like I'm so important. And we fill our lives with work that doesn't necessarily need to be done. And that's just a way of avoiding our creativity and avoiding ourselves at times. And then it talks about drought and how, you know, there's times where you just don't feel creatively inspired at all. And it's saying part of the solution for that is just continuing to do things, because eventually you're going to have a breakthrough at some point. I know I went through a point recently where I just was not feeling inspired, didn't really know what to draw or what to write or anything. And then I had like a burst of creativity, and I just have all these ideas, almost too many ideas now. And then it talks about the trap of fame. Fame is all about how am I doing in relation to others? How am I appearing to others? And it can be an addictive drug for some people. And then people, artists, instead of making things they want, they think, well, what's successful, instead of making what's true to their heart. And part of that as well is competition, comparing yourself to others. And I mean, I think that's not just an artist thing. I think that's a human thing. And I think that even in, you know, like the tarot community and the oracle community and all that kind of stuff, you know, that's any community really. It's easy to go, oh, so-and-so is doing so well, and then feel bad about yourself. And you have to remember that you're only seeing part of their lives, and also that it's not a race or a competition, and that your journey is different than other people's journey. So some kind of important, some important things there talking about in week 10. And then we have to talk about, in some of the exercises, some of the addictions that people fall into, like work and drugs and sex and money and food, and how people use that as a distraction for themselves. And then what's your favorite blockage? What's your favorite block? For me, it can be like watching TV rather than doing the art I'm supposed to do, or eating junk food instead of talking about how I feel about something. You know, I think these are all things that we do to a certain degree. I don't think any of these things are out of control, but it's easy to get sucked into things when you either have a realization that maybe you're not wanting to deal with, or you have a creative challenge in front of you and you're procrastinating on dealing with that, whether it's, you know, it could be in any area, I think, for anyone. And then she gets you to set a bottom line of like how much you're going to work, because workaholism is rewarded in our society. Unlike addictions to other things, workaholism is rewarded. And so where are your lines? Where are you going to take work home? You're not take work home. You take your vacation, things like that, like setting boundaries with your job. Week 11 is called Recovering a Sense of Autonomy. And it talks about acceptance, accepting the fact that you are an artist, accepting the fact that, you know, you're happier, you know, writing or making art or whatever it is than not writing, and that being an artist means that sometimes you're going to look a little weird to others, and that's okay. And it's all about accepting yourself. She also talks about success and how success can be sometimes a little bit daunting for people because if you're successful at one thing, people just want you to repeat that thing you were successful at instead of growing and changing, and that can be a challenge for some artists, and they can get very stuck and feel quite stale by that. And she talks about sports or doing physical activity to get yourself out of your head. What kind of sport or physical activity are you doing? Now, I'm a big walker. I like to walk. I also like dancing, and I do like, we have like a treadmill here at home, and then also like a Nordic track, and I like using those things. So I find exercise very important, and I find I get good ideas when I'm thinking, I can think well when I'm moving. So I do agree with that. I think it's good. And then it talks about building an artist's altar. And of course, you know, like I have like my spiritual altar, but I also have a creative altar as well. Because I think it's important to have a little home that reminds you of your creativity. She gets you to think of ways to nurture yourself. And then finally, the final chapter is called Recovering a Sense of Faith. So trusting the process, trusting that you're being led somewhere even if you can't see where the end result is. And the next part is about mystery. That sometimes, and again, I think that's part of trusting, is that there's a bigger mystery going on and we're not going to have all the answers. And by creating, we become part of that mystery and we become engaged in that mystery. And then also using your imagination and being playful, because creativity is not about seriousness, it's about being playful. So, you know, putting some play into your life. And also there's a part about, you know, velocity, about how once you start being creative and once you start doing things, it kind of takes on its own momentum, and that once you get into that sort of that rhythm and that stream, you start to move with it, and things start to happen of their own accord. And I certainly can testify to that in my life. So and then that's kind of the end there. I mean, she talks a little bit about what kind of things you know, making a list of things that you want to work on for the next 12 weeks and making a commitment to work on those things. She also talks about something called a God jar. I call it a goddess jar, a universe jar, whatever, where you write if you're worried about something, or you have some, you know, some kind of issue you're working on, that you can write a letter and put it in the jar and then be like, oh, God, the universe is taking care of it. And I think that's a really cool idea. And then she gets you to write down people that is safe for you to talk about your dreams, because there's some people that will poo-poo whatever you say no matter what and wet blanket it. But, you know, who's safe to talk to about your creativity and who's not, you know? Think about that kind of thing. So that's, and then she gets you to write a contract at the end that you're going to continue with your morning pages and artist dates for the next 30 days. And there's a little epilogue at the back. So that's kind of the Artist's Way book, and that's what I've been working through and done. I was thinking about going on to the next book she has, which is called The Vein of Gold, which is a much bigger book, but I don't know if anyone's interested. So let me know if you're interested at all. Like and subscribe. I'll talk to you all next time.